Welcome. This is According to Callus, and it's a Monday. And what's not unique about the 15,000 Mondays that have ever come before this, I can't say. However, I was listening to an episode of For the New Christian Intellectual. And that is a podcast for those of you that are not aware. Very interesting today. They were kind of talking about the idea of a ethnocentric nation or a traditional conservative and what the problems are with that. So I thought I'd take that and apply that to local situations, right? Just understanding that McKinney has changed extremely rapidly. Likewise, so has Texas in the last 20 years. And some for the better, some not so much. But tradition's an important thing, right? So we're going to talk about that. If you're interested, come and join me on the podcast. I'll be there. Okay, so that's been said. And now, on with the show. So one of the challenges that I have is, trying to do this all on my own is shooting the intros in video and then only kicking over to audio. And every once in a while, I get a hiccup. You may have heard the hiccup on the episode that I put out for Friday. Basically, the recorder didn't shut off when it was supposed to, which is kind of funny. So, any case, as the epitome of all that is evil in the modern world, or the modern United States, if you will, being the super straight, white Christian male, let me just say that I, for one, struggle to be upset with people that want to come to the States or to Texas in particular because they want a better situation for them and their family, that they want to get away from that which wherever they were. I mean, after all, I was an economic refugee myself coming here from Wisconsin 20 some years ago. The difference was when I came here, I came with the distinct intent of becoming a Texan. That distinct intent was based upon the premise that I was going to embrace that which was Texas and put that upon me so that I could follow those Texas values and that I could imbue that into my family, right? So one of the things that I had to learn real quick is that there are reasons why certain things are the way they are, right? Because Texas is different than, say, the state I came from, Wisconsin, and I didn't necessarily want to turn it into Wisconsin, unlike a lot of folks from California and New York. You know who you are. But there are some things about Texas that really weren't making a lot of sense, right? Really weren't sure what to do with that. But it was Texas. And you take some of the things that are less good with all the great things that were Texas. And one of the things that was there is this idea, this notion that there is the Texas nation, right? The idea that Texas was its own entity, even within the United States. And for that, I was grateful. I appreciated the idea behind that. Really, it inspired me. So when I'm looking around to McKinney and or Collin County or even Texas, and I see all these folks coming here, I couldn't help but think to myself, these people are fleeing less good areas within our own country to come what could only be termed as a much better location in our own country. So why should we begrudge somebody else that's coming from another nation to be here? This is where we kind of get into the ethno-national thing, right? So the problem, if you can call it that, is that the folks that are coming here don't necessarily share our values or our culture. And there's a lot of concern in certain sectors relating to that. Now, some of it may be legitimate, but I think a lot of it's non-legitimate, right? Typically, if somebody leaves where they came from, they want to go experience the new thing. Now, if they want to have their Starbucks on every block, or they want to have certain things like where they were in the previous state, but by and large, they still want to experience Texas. And, some friends of mine and I have always kicked around the idea, well, maybe we put a 10-year waiting on them. In other words, they got to be in Texas for 10 years before they can vote. Well, that's kind of hard to make something like that happen. But it's good cocktail conversation. It's interesting fodder. It's enjoyable speculation. But what if we could do that as a reality, right? Just think about it. When you move somewhere and you don't know the culture and you don't know what's the situation where you've moved to, are you always the best person to institute reform or to mandate that they do things your way? Somehow I don't think so. Somehow I think that we really ought to consider that perhaps, as the old saying goes, before you go pulling down that fence, you find out why the fence was put there in the first place. So perhaps you ought to figure out why some of the things are the way they are before you look to change them, right? So while you might not be overly excited that you have a bunch of people that live in your neighborhood that maybe don't look like you or don't talk like you, the reality is Texas is the melting pot, right? Texas is a microcosm of what the United States is. But I've got to believe that the vast majority of people that are coming to Texas specifically because there's something special about Texas. There's something that Texas offers that's not available in the other states. We used to say this about the United States as a whole, right? We used to say that the United States was the best country in the whole wide world. Never ever has there anything been like the United States, and everybody wants to come here. The issue is when everybody comes there, it ceases to be special. It ceases to have a draw if it's just like every other place, right? So when you bring your Californication, when you bring your New York odor, when you bring your New Jersey, stuff down here, and you try to form a new Texas based upon what you brought with you, that changes things. It's natural over time that you're going to get these little outposts, right? Whether it's like a Chinatown or the little Harlem or, there's all these little ethnic enclaves. Those naturally exist. Whether by design or by choice, they're there. You accept them and they become part of the larger character as a whole. And that's never really a bad thing. Now, there are things that maybe go with that are not great, that we're not excited about. But by and large, they can be dealt with. So the idea that, Texas is going to be a static, never changing place has largely been put to bed, right? That ship sailed. We're our own new entity. As much as we would like it to be 1836 again, it's 2021. However, that doesn't mean that we cannot relive the spirit of 1836. It does not mean that we can't organize and go forward to revitalize the spirit of 1836, to demand our own independence, to basically self-govern, whether it is at the local level where we've determined that, hey, we're not getting the representation out of our city council that we particularly like, so we're going to, visit the city council every week and take our 3 minutes to tell them the things that we wish they would do differently. Now, some people will go there and complain about dogs in the park. Some people go there and complain about apartment buildings. Actually, a lot of people go complain about apartment buildings. Some people will show up and talk about this street's been named after a bad person. Some people go complain about we don't like there's not enough trees in this town. There's all these things that you can talk about, and some are more pressing than others, which is not to say that nothing shouldn't be brought, but the reality is the city only has so much authority. The city can really only do so many things. And if it's doing more than that, it's tyranny. They're exceeding their authority. And if we tolerate that, if we allow it, if we go along with it, we only cede more and more liberty to our local government. Now, one of the things that I talked about back in 2019, I was on the campaign trail, and I talked about the idea that if you're a property owner and you want to develop your piece of property, if you're within a certain area, and I really think that we could do these experimental areas in multiple locations. It doesn't always have to be in one side or one part of town. But you could take, say, 40, 50 acres, and you lessen the restrictions, right? You take some of the codes off of there. Now, some people will get upset. Well, we're going to have lesser materials. We're going to have lesser this. We're going to have lesser that. Well, the idea is that it's so expensive now to build in the city, right? The property values have skyrocketed, mostly because people want to come here, and secondarily because people are snapping a property to turn it into rental property. Now, you can't change that in a good way. You can't stop that without having major negative repercussions. But one of the things you could do is where you have new building or where you have reinvestment or maybe reimagining an area, right? You take those areas and you turn them into experimental home building areas. So maybe you take away the square foot minimum and you drop it to 700 square foot. Maybe you change the allowable materials to include things that are not brick, things that are not that concrete siding, things that are maybe not quite as durable, but are far less expensive. Maybe recycled, maybe repurposed. Maybe you give them the opportunity to try and do different things, and then you can change up the density, right? Now, everybody hates apartments, right? The apartments are going to be the death of us all. And there's something to be said about somebody living in an apartment. It's not something they own. They're tenants. They're not working towards that freedom that we would acknowledge that you get from owning a piece of property. Unfortunately, with the way our current system is set up, you really never truly own your property. So if we just set that aside for the moment and we allow for the idea that you could get a little plot of land, maybe a lot that's, 30 by 30, right? And so you got this little lot and you can put on your little 700 square foot house. Maybe it's 2 stories. Maybe it's a single story with a loft. There's a lot of different variations, but 700 square foot, what is that? 7 foot by 10 foot? That's 70 square foot. And then you go 20 foot by 7 foot. Now you're at 350 square foot, right? There's a lot of variations there. You could go 20 by 20. Now you got a 400 square foot house, right? Is that right? No, I don't know. Well, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So the point is, when you change up, I apologize. It's been a long day, folks. I'm trying to do this off the top of my head. I have some, basic notes of what I wanted to cover tonight. But just the idea that you can do something unique, that you can try different things, spur the imagination, you can get some really unique buildings, some really unique housing situations that could be far less expensive, could actually create a whole new industry. And we are afraid of that, and we don't allow that. And we think that the only way to build is to build up and stack and pack. And I really think there's other options that we should look at exploring. I really don't see why that would be such a challenge, why that is such a danger. Now, I realize that, if you were to turn an entire city into an experimental area, well, yeah, that would be maybe problematic, although Houston managed to live through it. But again, this is something that you can do when you exert local control. When your city or cities are not run by developers, when they're not run by bankers, when they're not run by people who only seek to benefit their bottom line or their friend's bottom line. When we're looking for the greater good. Now I know, like my own mayor, for instance, and I have no personal animosity towards him, but he really talks a good game. I mean, he can put on a show when he comes in to tell you a story or tell you what he's going to do or how he's going to do it. But the reality is that it really shouldn't be the mayor's decision. It really shouldn't be his choice alone. We need to take advantage of the time at city council meetings. We need to utilize Robert's rules and make them listen to us. Make them follow the law as it exists. Make them treat the city as an independent organization as opposed to their personal, I'd say purse, but that might be a bit rude. Their personal clay. How about that? The city is not their clay to mold into what they want. It's based upon all the people that live here. There's 200,000 people here. We have 7 people that represent us, and at least 3 of them are really basically going to do whatever the mayor wants. Now, the city went along with it. The city voted those people in. But as time goes on, I would hope at some point we say, well, wait a minute. We want these things or we don't want these things. And we would be more involved. Now, I myself haven't shown up to a lot of these city council meetings because I'm going to other meetings and I'm doing other things. Not every activist can be active in every issue or every location. So if we want to exert our independence, if we want to exert our own self-government, we have to be involved. And when I say we, I mean the generic we of everybody in the city or the county or even the state. And then all that translates up. So if you're going to school board meetings, you ought to ask them, by what authority are you doing this? Who granted you that authority? Where is that allowed in the U.S. Constitution? Where is it allowed in the Texas State Constitution? Where is that allowed in the law? Why are we doing this? What government program mandates this? Why are we signed up for this government program? What do we really get out of that government program? These are all questions that are legitimate that if you're a parent with a child in the school district, I would think you would want to know. I would think you would be questioning as to why I'm paying some enormous sum of money to get a less than stellar product. Now, I can't answer those questions for you. You have to do that for yourself. And all that directly translates to both the county level and the state government level, right? Now, we're extremely blessed. I think we have a top-notch county government. Are they perfect? No. Are there some people that are there that have maybe been there too long? Maybe. But they're still doing a good job, right? I mean, they're not spending money like there's no tomorrow. They're being very cautious. They're being very gracious. They're trying to think ahead. And that's really what we want. We want people that can look ahead and can be considerate of what's likely to happen and what is happening and have enough flexibility to not put us too far in hock. Like, for instance, the city of Frisco. Now, if you live in the city of Frisco, that city has over $1 billion of debt with a B, $1 billion. And the school district alone has over $1 billion of debt with a B. And that's just what they'll acknowledge. There's no telling what their actual debt is because, quite frankly, government hides their debt. Government does all sorts of things, so you never really actually know. Now, without a doubt, Frisco is a jewel of North Texas. Frisco has attracted a lot of great things. And Frisco continues to grow, and it may very well pass the city of McKinney in its growth of people and the total number of people as far as when this next census takes place. But one thing I will give credit to McKinney for is I don't think we have near the debt load. I don't think we have near the extravagant expense. Now, I know there's those that would say the more you got to spend money to make money. There's something to be said for that. But again, if you're not going to exert influence, if you're not going to tell your city what you want, the city's going to do whatever in the world it wants. And honestly, I think that's what happened in Frisco. You know, Plano's another question altogether. I know my little sphere of McKinney. I know a little bit about Frisco, primarily through the ISD. I know a little bit about what goes down in Allen. I know they recently retired their mayor for life. I'm just kidding. And then, of course, Plano. Plano's its own little ball game, right? There's lots of things that go on down there that I'm not really sure why they're tolerated or why people think it's a good idea. But, again, they take advantage of their city council meetings. They show up in force. They talk the talk and they walk the walk. They make them answer for some of the things they're doing. In fact, they were very nearly able to take a majority in that last election cycle. Unfortunately, it didn't break their way, and whether or not it was completely straight up or whatever, the fact of the matter is they still have 3 solid members on the city council, and unless the other team decides to, I don't know, just shove them through, they're going to have to listen. They're going to have to talk. They're going to have to take that time and listen to the other side of the story. They're going to have to take that time to make a educated decision and try and work together to come up with a good solution for the futures of Plano. And I have faith that that'll happen. Why? Because there's lots of people, particularly among the moderates, that actually they want growth, but they want it at a decent pace. They want it well planned out, well thought out. And it's hard to fault them for that. It's hard to get upset about that. Those are all good things to do. So in either case, those are just my couple thoughts on that, right? So ordinarily at this point, I would transition, right? I would say, I got nothing more to say on that, but unfortunately I kind of do. So we elect these folks, we send them down to Austin. They go down there to work for 4 months every other year, and really and truly, we give them 8 marching items, right? Or 10 marching items, or whatever it is at any given year, and they deliver some, they don't deliver others. But being able to hide down in Austin during the municipal election cycle seems really to benefit both sides of that dichotomy, doesn't it? So those that care about what's going down in Austin are also likely the ones that care about what's going on with the municipal elections. So if you're involved in the municipal elections, you can't go down to Austin. And if you're worried about what's going down in Austin, you have to ignore the municipal elections, or at least not be thoroughly involved. Nice trick that got pulled there, right? Now, I know a lot of my friends and people think that they ought to take and put all the elections at the same time. Well, maybe that works. Maybe that would be all right. But could you imagine trying to keep track of, 50 races? Or maybe 75 races? Do you really want to try that? I don't know. I really don't know. I think that might be too much. I mean, we have a hard enough time getting people to just follow half a dozen races for city council and school board. Or, maybe you've got the races to go on down to Austin. There's only 5, 6 out of Collin County, but then you throw in, you got 2 or 3 running for the commissioner's court. So, I mean, it's a lot. And the average voter just doesn't find the time to keep track of all that, just doesn't understand all the details in it. And so they use the shortcuts, right? They use the shortcut of, well, he's got an R after his name. Oh, got a D after his name. Oh, they're independents, right? So either way, there's always something. There's always the shortcut, but it makes for voters that aren't engaged. And we want people to be engaged. We want them to know what's going on. And how do we do that? How do we do that? You got to get involved. You got to put in the effort. You got to participate. This is a participatory thing. We have a constitutional republic, right? The republic is only as good as those people that want to be involved. The republic only works if those people that are involved actually know what's going on. And quite frankly, we're not doing a good job of that. So I'm going to suggest that going forward, we take the time to get educated, to get a better understanding of how these things work, and then we go forth and we demand more. We demand better from those that are representing us. Now, as I said, next week I'm going to do probably a 4 or 5 part series on the 5-star plan. And I'm going to lay out, because I think he's got a working framework of how we might do this, how this improves the situation. And going forward, I think it's going to be extremely important, because we're coming up on the next big election cycle, right? We might have next year in August or September, depending on how long it takes them to finish the redistricting, the primaries, and after the primaries, we'll have a general election. And potentially, we could be running through all these different people. And it would sure be helpful to know just who they are and what are we going to get out of them. Right? What do we expect out of them? That is the only way we can truly hold them accountable. That is the only way we can truly make sense out of what's going on. And I know I'm getting a little long-winded, and quite frankly, I'm really tired. So, you know what? We're just going to cut it off. That, my friends, is the episode of According to Callus for Monday. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you on the other side.